Hey guys, welcome to Coffee Snob on YouTube. I wanted to talk today about some principles of making good coffee. So you can use this in any type of process. Today, I just find that it's best shown by the pour-over method. First, I want to talk to you about something really simple. It's freshness of your coffee. So a lot of people overlook this and they think, okay, I can buy beans at a bulk grocery store or something like that. They've had these beans on the shelf for probably a couple of weeks already, and then you buy them and you maybe take 2 weeks to go through a pound of coffee or maybe a whole entire week. And that's not the way you want to go. Okay, so what you want to do is find a roaster in your area if possible. This is going to be a coffee shop that roasts their own coffee, or you want to check the date on the bag. So when you're walking through the grocery store, grab a bag of coffee, it will have a best by date or preferably a roasted on date. That's when you know that these people are serious about roasting coffee, they are serious about freshness. You want to check this roasted on date, and you want to get it within a week of that date. That's going to be preferable. You want to get it within a week, and that's going to give you the maximum amount of time at home or in your shop to brew this coffee and it still be fresh. Think of it like fresh bread. You don't buy bread that's already stale, that's been there for weeks sitting in a grocery store. You want to get the freshest bread closest to the bake date because this product is very perishable and it goes stale. So same thing with coffee. This is very perishable. It will go stale on you. So what you want to do is get it as fresh as possible. And you always want to get it, of course, whole bean. You always want to get it whole bean, grind it just before you use it. This will hold in the CO2 in the bean a lot longer than this will. This has a lot more surface area, so the coffee is actually going to let the CO2 out of the bean a lot faster than it will hold it in whole bean. So that's the reason you want to get whole bean, because there's a lot less surface area there. So next step, you want to make sure that the grind that you're using is correct for the process of making your coffee. So today we're going to use a pour over. So we want to have a medium to fine grind for a pour over. And you can kind of go either direction. It just depends on your preference. I prefer medium to coarse grind. And it's going to be different on every grinder setup. You want this a little coarser than sand, say. Like a coarse sand, you want it a little bit coarser than that. So that's what you want to look for in a pour over. Okay, if you're using something like a French press or something with more of a direct contact, what we call the direct contact method, your coffee and your water are going to be together the entire brewing process. So what you're going to want to do is grind your coffee a little coarser, and that makes it a little bit more suitable for your water to be in direct contact. You want your water to permeate your coffee throughout the process. If it's too fine, then what you're going to do is over-extract your coffee and it's going to be really bitter. Okay, the next thing in the principles of coffee is going to be your water. A lot of people overlook this. They just use sink water or whatever. Your water is actually really important. Depending on what's in your water, you can get off flavors, or your extraction can completely change depending on what you're using. You never want to use just flat RO water. So reverse osmosis water is just void of any kind of substance or minerals or anything in your water. What that's going to do is give you kind of a bland taste. It's kind of like not having salt in your food. So what you want to do is you actually want to have kind of a mixture. If I have RO water, say like from a bottle of water or from water that you get from like a water shop or something like that, what I usually do is run a little bit of sink water in it. So what I'll do is I'll fill it up all the way with RO water, and then I'll just go over to the sink and give me a little shot of well water, or maybe a water that's just run through a carbon filter. If you're on city water, you always want to run your water through a carbon filter. And what that's going to do is just get all the chlorine taste, all the fluoride, all the chemical taste out of your water before you start. Your coffee will never be better than the water that you're using. And if you want chlorine taste in your water, by all means, use your sink water in your city. But if you don't, go ahead and get a cheap carbon filter. You can pick them up at your hardware store and just run it right into your carbon filter and up to your sink, or you can have like a specific tap for it, is what people usually do. So what we want to do here is get our water at the right temperature also. So 1, you want clean water, and 2, you want your water at the right temperature. For a pour over and most coffee brewing, they say you want it right at 200 degrees. Of course, you can go either way on that. You can go down to maybe 195 or up to maybe 205, depending on what kind of flavors and acidity levels you want to pull out of your coffee. So the lower the temperature, the more well-rounded, the more smooth, but also kind of the more muted and almost muddy notes that you're going to get out of your coffee. So if you want a more well-rounded coffee, or if you have a coffee with like a lot of cocoa notes or something like that, you want to go ahead and maybe even drop the temperature just a couple of degrees. And it doesn't sound like it's going to be that big a deal, but it's actually huge when you're dealing with coffee, especially something like espresso or something that has a really hard extraction. So if you want to get more bright flavors out of your coffee, like if you have a really fruity coffee, a lot of times you can bump it up just a couple of degrees, maybe get it boiling and then just run a little bit of cold water in it to get it right off of the boiling temperature to hit right at 200 or a little bit higher. And what you're going to do is get a lot brighter cup of coffee, but you have to be careful because you could get to a really astringent coffee if you go too hot. A lot of people just boil their water and just pour it in, and what that's going to do is make a really bitter, astringent coffee. You want it right at 200. Boiling point is 212 degrees. So you see we're boiling over here. We have steam coming out of our pitcher. What I'm going to want to do with that is actually take this boiling water, and then I'm going to just run a little bit of cold water in it. If you're doing this at home, you don't have to have a temperature gauge. If you're doing this for a cafe, what I really, really recommend you do is get yourself a water tower that you can dial in exactly where you want it. Espresso Parts has a great one, or you can just use a thermometer, a digital thermometer, and get it in there and get it right at 200. It's really important, like I said. But first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to preheat this pour over for when we get started. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour my water in there and just let all of this get hot for our pour over method. And what that's going to do is prevent this cold ceramic from pulling out my heat in my water. What's going to happen is when I start to pour water in there, if this isn't already hot, it's going to start taking the heat out of my water and replacing it with the cold that's actually in the ceramic, because this is really heavy and thick. Okay, so once that's heated, I've got water that's probably sitting at about 212, so I'm just going to go run just a little bit of cold water in it real quick, just to get the temperature down just a bit. Okay, so now I've got my water about where I want. We're going to be sitting really close to 200 degrees right now. I'm going to add my coffee in, and what I usually do, you can weigh it out by the gram. For a 12-ounce cup, you want to be sitting right around 25 grams of coffee. Or for a 12-ounce cup, what you can do is if you're measuring with a tablespoon, you can do 2 tablespoons per 8 ounces. So you're going to want 3 tablespoons of coffee, just flat tablespoons, in your pour over here if you're doing a 12-ounce cup. And that's kind of average. So I'm going to say pretty close. I think I do this enough to where I can kind of eyeball it, hopefully. Okay, so I have fresh ground coffee, 1. I have water that's at the right temperature and it's clean. That's step number 2. My grind is correct for my coffee, so that's step number 3. Now we want to talk about contact time. This is going to go hand in hand with the grind of your coffee. So if you have a finer grind and a pour over, what that's going to make happen is it's going to make your water slow down in the process. That's why it's really important to get the right grind with a pour over. And that's why I love it, because it really shows these principles best in a pour over situation. So what we want to do is we want to control how fast our water actually pours through here. We want to kind of land, probably with a 12-ounce cup of coffee, we want to land around 3.5 minutes. So I'm just going to pour over very slowly to start off with. And once my grounds get saturated, I'm just going to let them sit for a sec. And what that's going to do is let all the coffee kind of weave its way and get all the air out of this coffee, and it's going to saturate it completely. And around this time, I want to go set my timer for about 3.5 minutes. So once that's set for just a sec, then I want to start pouring over. And you want to just pour over nice and slow. You don't want to rush yourself. These pots here are great for pour over because they have a great little gooseneck on there, and it allows you to get close to the coffee and pour very gently. And that's really going to help with your pour over. What you don't want to do is pour really rough and introduce a lot of oxygen into your coffee. That's going to change your brew profile. And if you think about brewing coffee, really what you're doing here is chemistry. So when you start adding outside foreign, chemicals, then it's going to change your brew profile up. So you want to pour nice and gently and slow. And notice that's just coming out just nice and steady and slow here. So I'll usually pour a little bit, and then I'll let the level go down just a little bit, and then I'll pour again. So your contact in here, the water is actually going through your grounds. So the coffee that's already in our cup right now, that water is not going to be in contact with our grounds anymore. So this is not considered a direct contact method. So you're going to have to control how fast this water goes through. In a pour over, the more surface area that you get, the more you fill this up, the faster this is going to filter through. So you actually don't want to fill it up just all the way. You want to fill it up maybe half, 3/4, depending on how fast you need this to run through. And you always want to let it just go ahead and drip all the way down. That's why it's important to kind of keep an eye on how fast this is going through. So we'll just give that a sec. Okay, so now our coffee's almost through. It's just finishing up. And I'm just gonna just give it a sec just to finish out. You notice we're right at the top here. Okay. Okay, now we have a delicious cup of coffee. When you brew coffee correctly, you shouldn't need any cream or sugar. Coffee is supposed to taste good. That's what I tell people all the time. Coffee is supposed to taste good, black, all by itself. It should be smooth. It should be flavorful. It should be exactly what you smell, plus the acidity. It's just going to be great. So let's give this a shot. That is super smooth, super flavorful. It's almost got some grapefruit, some almost orange kind of citrusy notes because I'm using an Ethiopia. If you want a good bang for buck coffee, by the way, always use an Ethiopia. That's kind of what I go for. Ethiopia, Guatemala, some of these countries that are just world renowned for making good coffee. They always have a good bang for buck. There's a lot of garbage coffee out there, and then there's some gems out there. If you want to find some good coffee that I definitely approve of and that I actually use in my shop, just check out the link right here below, and you can just go straight there and find it. A lot of times the roaster will put flavor notes on the bag. Just look for something that you're into, give it a shot, and then when you're tasting this, what you're gonna wanna do is just get your nose right up into it and give it a nice smell, so you're gonna get the aroma of it. And then I'm not being rude, I'm actually drinking my coffee correctly. What you're gonna wanna do is slurp this. And what that's gonna do is aerate it a little bit, and it's gonna throw it across your palate and get it into your nose. Your nose is where you get all the nuances of flavors. Your tongue is actually just gonna give you 4 different characteristics of what this coffee is, just sweet, salty, bitter, sour. So what you're gonna wanna do is get that into your nose, and you're gonna wanna kind of almost breathe it a little bit, and that's gonna give you all the nuances of this cup of coffee. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any more questions, you can just leave it in the comments. You can email me. If you wanna see just a quick process or breakdown of this, I've got another YouTube video of me just making a quick pour over that I think you'll probably love. But happy brewing. Thanks for checking out Coffee Snob. We'll see you next time.